Well, good afternoon. We have now a very interesting session with female and male, and also with young scholars and very mature scholars, not by age, but by trajectory, which I think is a very nice combination. So without further ado, I give the floor to Adriana from Unicamp and Fernando. And perhaps I will not introduce you. Do you want? Yeah, I think that is better if you want to say a few words about yourself, if you want. It's better. And then, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adriana. I'm a researcher from Unicamp, one of the coordinators of the Laboratory of Studies on Research Organization and Innovation. And what we are going to present today here, it's some selected results of our research on research and innovation project. So here I put the photos of the whole team, people that passed through our team inside the whole project. In what we say inside the project is AXIS 2, which is about peer review, bias and funding decisions. So here today to represent the group, Fernando and me, we are going to present, and we are going to talk about peer review and influencing factors in research project funding decisions. Thank you, Fernando, and thank you for all the team for helping us in this collective effort. So here we are going to try to answer two different and important questions in order to generate inputs to optimize funding allocation in São Paulo Research Foundation. So the first one is, what are the factors that influence the agency's peer review decision to award funding? So we try to understand this in FAPESP. Of course, as we are going to see, we use it just one program, the regular research grant. So we have much more to do. And the second question, what is the outcome of a simulation using partial lottery? We use it as a shadow experiment. FAPESP did not conduct a lottery itself, so it's a simulation as a complementary selection method to peer review at the agency. So, of course, we are based in a lot of literature review about peer review. I'm not going to give much details about it, but we all know about all the literature that's discussing bias in peer review, and because of that, the increasing interest in discussing this evaluation and prioritization methods, and also the alternative methods. So James talked about that, about lottery, about the distributed peer review, and this is increasing. And there's one important issue here, because we have a few studies in the Global South about it. We don't have a lot of funding agencies from the Global South doing this kind of experiments or simulations. So that's why we are here trying to answer this question using FAPESP data. So our analysis is based on regular research grants applications submitted to FAPESP between 2000 and 2017, including both the approved and the rejected proposals. So we have information about the proposals, the applicants, the reviewers, and the reviews as well. So we have the text of the reviews, and we have the scores that the reviewers gave to the proposals. So for our study here, we are talking about 20,000 grant proposals, both funded and denied, because we don't have the data from the reviewers and the reviews for the whole original database, which is about 40,000. And we also complemented this with data from the CV Lattes to see how the publication issue interferes in funding decisions. So to do that, we discussed it a lot and selected some key variables to our analysis. So we are using the field of knowledge and the submission year, trying to understand how things are different or not between these knowledge areas and within these 17 years, the gender of applicants and reviewers, the seniority. So we are trying to do like using the number of academic years, so since a PhD defense until the moment they submitted the proposal, and also the difference of this academic age of applicants and reviewers to see the factor of seniority, and also the scholarly output before the submission. So here we are using the number of journal papers, book chapters, and conferences papers, but also the number of papers in SJR ranked journals and the median SJR of the journals in which the papers are publicated. So we are using some kind of bibliometric here, and I know there's a lot of other metrics, but that's what we had in that moment. We are discussing how to develop this in the future, and also the peer review scores. So we have like two main scores, the score that the peer reviews gave to the applicant about their profile, and the score that the reviewers gave to the project about the quality and the merit of the project. So I'm calling Fernando. He's going to say about the methodology and some of our results. Then I come back.
Okay, we made a rehearsal about this choir. So my name is Fernando Colugnati. I'm from the Federal University of Juiz de Fora. It's a city outside of the state of São Paulo state. I don't want to translate the name of my city because it would be a kind of, it's something like outside referee or something like that. But, well, so what we did, oh yeah, sorry. So I'm here to try to explain the methodology we use to analyze this data. As Sergio told, I am a statistician. My background is statistics. And we use a kind of algorithm for classification. Our purpose was to estimate the probability of being approved to the project, receive the grant. So I'm using the XGBoost algorithm. It's broadly used for classification problems. And what most people, I think most people don't know, that to classify any algorithm that classifies something, it's using probabilities, estimated probabilities. So I'm using not the final classification, but using the probability estimated. And after that, I'll represent some results using receiver operating characteristic curves. People from the health area knows this a lot. It's how we test diagnostic kits or diagnostic tests. And then we'll try to see the distribution of those probabilities on grant awards. And after that, we have a Monte Carlo simulation trying to simulate this lottery using a standardized effect. I'll try to explain this afterward because so we made 7 models making different combinations of the sets of variables that we have. So I think it's better now. Model 1 is the simpler model. We just have the data from the gender and seniority of the grantee, the proposal, and from the reviewer. Sorry, thank you. And then we are kind of increasing the complexity of the models, introducing the classification of the grantee curriculum for the applicant's profile, and after that for the research proposal. So we are kind of mixing data that we collected from the CV lattice and data that we collected from the reviewers at FAPESP. And the Model 7 is the whole thing. So we'll focus more on the Model 1 and Model 6 because it's the more comprehensive model, the one that best adjusted in terms of statistical measurements. And I'll try to, the first thing was trying to simulate how this review was acting in terms of classification. So using the Model 1, the simpler one, we have this curve, and we have the area under the curve, the AUC. The closer to 1, the better the classification. So here we have a 0.7. It's a poor classification. We don't have it using just the data from the civilities. And that one is from model 6 that we have almost 90% of discrimination. The perfect curve would be, the area 1 would be the 90 degrees X over there. So we see that we gain a lot of discrimination when we include the reviewer's opinion about the project, not only the curriculum history. But which was the variables that was most influencing this final probability or this final classification? Well, we have the measure of relative influence of these variables. So using model 1, we see that the most influential is the field of knowledge of the applicant. But actually, this is not an influence. It's because the average probability of a grant approval varies a lot from area to area. So we range from like 40% of the proposals approved to almost 75% in some areas. So this is what we got. And after that, we have the scholarly output. We have some measures of the bibliometrics, number of papers ranked by SJR. And we see a very shy influence of seniority and gender, but they are still relevant if we take off the knowledge, the area of knowledge. So this influence increases a bit. And this is what we have on model 6. So it's a huge difference because in the end, it's the opinion of the reviewer on the classification of the reviewer that it's really what defines the approval of the grant. It's kind of expected, but we see here the reviewer score for the research purpose and the reviewer score for the application, the applicant's profile that are kind of governing all the process. So how are these probabilities? So this is the primary remarks we have. So we have some subtle but significant biases on scholarly output, seniority, and gender. Merit is dominant, is a dominant factor, but we see that the scientific quality of the research proposal is the greater player in this game. And also, we can see if we have at least a part of this grants that would be eligible, let's say, for a lottery. So that's what we have. And we have in the horizontal axis the probability of a grant award, in blue the awarded, and in red not awarded projects. And as we can see, using model 6 and 7, we have a subset when people would have been approved, but they weren't, and people that would be rejected, but they were approved. So it's this middle that interests us most about this behavior, because the extremes, they are clear. So they are very excellent or very good projects, and in the zero tail, we have the deficient or regular proposals. And when we put the bibliometry in the model 6, we see that it's more a continuum behavior. And when we drop this off, we have a kind of discretization. But it doesn't matter here right now. Then we call this between the 0.25 to 0.75, we call this a gray zone. And we'll kind of focus on this gray zone right now. And this is what we have. And it's not a zoom out from that picture. It's a new model that I ran just with the gray zone. We see that the probability almost doesn't change, and we see that it doesn't make difference from model 1 and model 7. And believe me, model 1, 2, 3, and 4 presents the similar behavior of this. And, well, so we thought that this would be a great opportunity to run the lottery on this kind of proposals. And, well, this is something we are trying. It's a tentative that we are showing here. When they invite someone to speak something about, it's supposed that the people know what he's doing, but this is not the case, so this is a kind of disclaimer I made in here. But we want to hear from you what makes sense, or how can we continue this. Because we took this gray zone, and we see that it's almost half-half, it's almost 50%. I work with many other clinical trials by randomization that were worse distributed than this one. So I made a Monte Carlo simulation, a simple Monte Carlo simulation with 1,000 repetitions, and giving 50% chance of being approved or not being approved. So I made 1,000 times the work that people in FAPESP do in a computer. Took me like 10 seconds, but and using here just 2 performance indicators, the number of journal papers and the number of journal papers ranked at SJR. And that's it. I am using effect size measure, that's the coherence D, and just to give, it's a standard deviation. You can interpret this as a standard deviation that we are subtracting the control, the approved and the rejected proposals. So negative values favors the contracted, the awarded, and positive values favors the rejected. And we have this before, there's this matrix before the project, the process of the project, and after that. So we can see that what we observed are in those lines. So here is the standardized observed measurement that we had, and here the blue is before, what they had in hands when they are analyzing the project, and the red one is the output of this grant, kind of. So first of all, the difference, the coherence D is really, really small. It's almost no effect. We don't have effect, we don't have difference in this bibliometric parameters. So, and when we make the Monte Carlo simulation, things go through 0. So this difference vanishes even more. This is the total of the papers, and this one. So each point is a simulation. And this is for the SJR ranked journals. We see the similar behavior. Here we have more qualified papers, we can assume that. And we see a bit more effect favoring the grantees. But again, it's a really, really small effect. And everything goes to 0 again when we run this Monte Carlo simulation. So, conclusions about it, I give to Adriana because I still don't have any. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. So, considering these results, what we are trying to discuss here, that implementing a partial lottery could reduce the agency's discretionary bias and enhance the fairness of funding decisions. So we can discuss this with FAPESP. And here's a provocation that if resources are not constrained, all proposals falling in the gray zone should ideally be funded, because we have no difference in this area. So it would be nice to hear from FAPESP also what you think about it. We are still working on this data, so we have like some ongoing studies and some future studies. Now, in these ongoing studies, we are trying to analyze the peer review reports, so we are now looking at the texts, and we are using the natural language toolkits and artificial intelligence to understand the patterns in this text. So, just a really short conclusions from now. We see that the reviews for rejected proposals, they are longer, they are denser, they are more complex, they are more evaluative, and also they are more negative regarding sentiment analysis. And those that were accepted are more direct, more fluent, and more positive. But there's something very interesting, but even though the difference between the groups is statistically significant, the polarity comes near the neutral, which reflects that the reviewers are mostly technical and not so just positive or negative. And the neutral tone is more pronounced in reviews written by women compared to men. So there are some things that we are still working on. I'm looking to Daniela, Cesar, Jesus here. They're helping me with that. And what we plan to do in the future is extending this application methodology using more recent data from FAPESP and also other programs from FAPESP. We are now doing the same exercise with the young scholar, the jovem pesquisador from FAPESP, but we are very much keen to do this with other FAPESP's programs, and also to improve the shadow experiment by incorporating other performance indicators, other selection methods. It would be very nice to hear from James that's experiencing this with other funding agencies, how we can improve this effort. So thank you a lot, and that's it.
Thank you so much. I found it absolutely fascinating. Now, please, Yohanna Juk from Unicamp. We talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion in research funding agencies. Please, Yohanna, if you want to say something about yourself.
Yes, of course.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Yohanna. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Unicamp, and I'm going to present to you a little bit about two researches that we did in our research group, the Research and Innovation, that are related to equity, diversity, and inclusion in funding agencies. So before I start to talk about the researches specifically, we saw a lot about people discussing EDI today. So Professor Kay discussed this, Professor Diana, they are mentioning EDI very frequently. But although this is a kind of a hot topic, we have been discussing EDI or discussing inequalities in science or way to promote a more equitable and inclusion scientific environment for quite some time now. So I wanted to quote here Dr. Ruth Hubbard. She was the first woman biology professor to be awarded tenured in Harvard in 1974. And what she said is that women and non-white working class and poor men have largely been outside the process of science making. We have not formulated the questions scientists ask, nor have we answered them. This undoubtedly has affected the content of science, but it had also affected the social context and the ambience in which science is done. So this is a hot topic. This is being discussed right now. This is in political scrutiny right now, but we have been discussing this for quite some time. But we have seen progress ever since what Dr. Ruth said, and many movements, initiatives, and programs have been launched across the globe with the intention of promoting a more equitable environment in the scientific world. So I'm just sharing with you a little bit of this. These are being promoted by funding agencies, by the Global Research Council, by universities, many research on the matter. So we have the Cape Town Statement on Fairness, Equity, and Diversity, the Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Working Group that was launched in 2017. We have FAPESP that has a working team on EDI. UKRI was a very pioneer funding agencies discussing this, and ways to collect, guidance on monitoring diversity data. So this is a topic of interest. It was before and it still is now. So as a consequence of this movement, EDI is also a cross-cutting theme in our research project. So these are three of our axes of discussion tracks in the Research and Innovation project, and we can discuss NDI when we are discussing ways to connect funding to impact. We can discuss NDIs in new ways of prioritizing, selecting, and deciding on research funding, and in ways of discussing professional trajectories, mobility of researchers. So since this is a cross-cutting topic, I'm going to share briefly with you about two studies that we did that touches this discussions of EDI. So the first one is the Assessing Funding Agencies' Capacity to Address Science Inequities. That was a collaborative work between me, Professor Sergio, Karen, Evandro and Bernardo, and the other work that discusses motherhood and ex-ante evaluation that investigate the inclusion of this criteria for female researchers in public funding in Brazil. That is authored by Professor Ana Maria Carneiro, Luisa Maria Capanema, Adriana, Larissa, and João Gabriel. So I'm going to discuss very briefly methodologies, main findings. So if you want to have more information, for instance, in this one, the assessing funding agencies, you can also assess the paper. It has been published in May this year. And this was a pilot study. We selected 10 funding agencies across the globe, and we did a benchmark and a literature review on NDI and funding agencies and this kind of initiatives. In order to create, to see if there is pattern, trends in ways they are dealing with DI in promoting a more inclusive scientific environment. So we wanted to create categories for ADI-related initiatives and programs. And so we created a kind of a code book to classify the institutional approaches adopted by these funding agencies. So we did that by collecting secondary data from published documents. So most funding agencies, they have like a gender equality plan or an EDI-related plan, and there they describe what they are doing, what they want to do, what is being implemented, and what may be implemented in the future. So we collected this data and data that is also available on funding agencies' websites. From 2017, that was the year the Global Research Council launched that working group, to 2024. And then by collecting this, we could classify the institutional approaches adopted by these funding agencies. So we analyzed, we collected this, and we also went to search for funding agencies' institutional and contextual information. And this is important because EDI, funding agents operate under specific legislations, and EDI is also affected by, it can be considered sensitive data, so it's important to see this contextual background to understand what kind of movements funding agencies can actually promote. So these are the 7 categories of engagement. We consider if funding agencies mention EDI in official documents, what kind of axis of diversity, if they consider specifically just gender, or if they have a more intersectional approach, if they have dedicated EDI departments, teams, or different types of institutional areas. And then we looked in the operationalization of this. So if they have policy and institutional guideline for staff, for reviewers or grantees, we also checked if they have specific calls, EDI-related calls, or if they have EDI-related criteria in regular calls, so to see how this works internally as well. And by that, if they have internal training for staff, reviewers, applicants, and grantees. And then we come to the data collection of the same categories and also decision boards. And then this is the part that most agencies are worried about, that is not just to evaluate, but how to disseminate this information. So most agencies share this information in aggregated data. It's the way they can diffuse this somehow, but it's the way they are mostly worried when I present this kind of presentation. They usually discuss, we can do that because of our legislation. But what we saw is that there are ways to communicate this. We can share it with you, but we are doing this internally. We are measuring progress. We are somehow monitoring and evaluating this. So the result looks like this. This is the visual representation of our paper. We did not want it to be a ranking because the idea was not to compare, but more to inspire these funding agencies to see patterns, to exchange information, to share good practices, and to see how they are performing in these specific categories. The main results show that funding agencies are enhancing communication with stakeholders to improve transparency. We see agencies from Australia, from Canada, Chile, Switzerland, the UK, and the US. We did that last year, so we don't know how this may be affected now, but they report aggregated diversity data availability. We have agencies that employ interactive platforms, so this is very interesting, so that researchers can actually download and interact with this kind of data and to have data visualization and everything. So this was a pilot study. Our next steps for this consider applying the same framework for Brazilian funding agencies. So we are collecting secondary data from state agencies in Brazil, from CNPq and CAPES as well, and from Instituto Serra Pilheira, that has a very specific way of dealing with EDI initiatives. And also, we wanted to check if primary data changes something in what we are capturing with our framework, so it would be nice to have this primary data through interviews. So that's the first study. And the second one is more related to how specifically this EDI-related, this motherhood criteria affect this ex-ante evaluation of a specific kind of fellowship. So it explores the change in evaluation criteria in the Research Productivity Fellowship Program from CNPq regarding motherhood. So two analyses were conducted, and I also ask for Adriana and Maria, if you want to jump in and add or clarify something, please do. So the first qualitative analysis is for the CNPq Research Productivity Calls. It covers a period from 2019 to 2023, and it investigated 48 area committees composed of researchers from various fields, and it focused on the implementation of this criteria related to extended evaluation periods due to pregnancy or adoption. And the other part of the analysis is a quantitative one for grant applications and approvals. It has covered the period of 2013 to 2023, and also uses data from available at CNPq. So this investigation is still an ongoing research, and the main results for now show that there is a timid incorporation of a specific criteria for women researchers related to pregnancy and childbirth, such as this, including this, the extended evaluation period due to this kind of pregnancy or adoption. So in 2019, there was only one of the 48 CNPq advisory committees that included such a criteria. And between 2021 and 2023, it increases to 15, so 1/3 of the total adopted these measures. And the study also considered that there was this key time window. In 2024, CNPq made it mandatory for all 48 committees to adopt this special criteria. So there was, in this analysis, a significant difference in approval of female researchers among committees that adopted and that did not adopt this criteria. And in the other analysis, when analyzing within each committee, there were no clear improvement in women's approval rates in most committees that adopted the criteria. And that has one exception, that was the Pioneer committee that already implemented this before in 2019. So there are three possible explanations for this result. The first one is that approval rates for women were already higher in committees that adopted that criteria. The other one is that the positive effects of this may take some time to analyze, so it can be seen, for instance, for the first committee, the Pioneer one that already implemented it in 2019, but there is still no time to evaluate in the other ones. And the third explanation is that current extension period may be insufficient, as evidence show that productivity declines can last up to 4 years after childbirth. So the next steps regarding this specific study is to systematically monitor the trends in the coming years to evaluate what kind of difference can be seen if and how implementing this special criteria, initially limited to this number of committees and expanded it, could actually change and demonstrate different types of patterns of awards. So these are the two ongoing researchers that were being made. And we can see that EDI is in the spotlight. As I said before, this was important and still is important, especially now that DEI is facing this political scrutiny nowadays. But as Professor Kay said before, this is a long-term endeavor. And for us to still continue to do that, we still need to have data to measure progress or to measure the lack of progress in this kind of field. So what we see is that the only way for us researchers to continue to do that is to study, is to collect data, is to share data, and to debate it openly and frankly like we're doing now. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, it's hard to wait until the questions. Okay, now, okay, so please go ahead. It's the time for Elizabeth Balbachevsky that is going to talk about, let me just tell you, yeah, a typology of university and no? Oh, so please go and say you, because I copied the program and perhaps I made a mistake.
So thank you very much. My name is Elizabeth Balbachevsky, and I am a professor of political science at the Universidad of São Paulo. I've been working with GOP and this marvelous team for a long time. And yes, science policy is one of my subject interest. Well, there is some mistake here because Professor Simon Schwarzman was supposed to make a presentation about the typology of higher education institutions in Brazil. This is going to be covered by Ana Maria Carneiro. I'm going to make a presentation about, well, how the institutes, research institutes from the state of São Paulo fare on FAPESP's support. I think that the main idea of my, sorry, it's in Portuguese, but the main idea is that looking at how the institutes, research institutes, the institutes that belong to the state of São Paulo government fare against ecosystem, research ecosystem that is dominated by academic institutions, because in Brazil, most of the research is done inside universities. And let's say that the logics of the university life dominates the the policies that support high, research in some Brazil in general, in São Paulo, of course. So the main idea of this research is to look at how institutes that are not universities, so are not higher education, they don't have students, they don't have, or at least they are not supposed to have graduate education and things like that, how they fare against, let's say, an environment that supports research using academic standards as metrics to judge the quality of the proposals. So the main idea is to look at the quadrants, the model, the typology proposed by Stokes. What we see is that we suppose that FAPESP was taken as one of the main institutions, the main agencies supporting research in São Paulo. the main idea is that FAPESP would, because the academic values are so ingrained in this agency, it will support basic research and also what Stokes call the quadrant, Pasteur's quadrant. The idea is that it's a research that it's both focusing in advancing knowledge and the usefulness of this knowledge. But the problem is that, of course, many of the research institutes are not placed in this quadrant. They can and are, and of course they are. Some of them are, let's say, in the Edson quadrant because they are mostly their goal is to develop applied research, develop applied technology and things like that. So what we see looking at the new calls, at the development of the FAPESP's calls and the design of the research policy in Brazil as elsewhere, is that it moved from the board, the basic research, into the Pasteur quadrant research. Nowadays, there is an important quest of the application of the knowledge that is being supported by these researchers. So what happens with the institutes, research institutes of the state of São Paulo? These institutions that are not academics by themselves, they are not, they don't have graduate education, they don't have graduate programs, so not all their researchers are familiar with graduate programs. They don't have PhD students to advise. They don't have master students, and so on. What happened with these institutes in front of FAPESP? Well, our presentation will, first of all, make a characterization of these institutes, mostly localizing their outputs using these Stokes quadrants to understand the main logics that organize their works. And we are going to look at the support that FAPESP gave to these institutes, how they fare against the support that FAPESP opened to all researchers at the state of São Paulo. We have a database coming from 1992 until 2024, and in this database we have all the grants, all the applications that succeeded to have a support from FAPESP, what kind of programs these applications was made and things like that. And we are looking about the nature of the support, what kind of support, if it's a project, scholarship, if it supports the improvements in the research infrastructure, or in the divulgation of these, of the outputs of this research. And inside this, there is one main issue, which is the access to some very special and very important programs that are designed by FAPESP to support, let's say, long-term research projects in universities and research environments in general. The other issue is about the human resources that comes with this support inside to these institutes, and the support for internationalization of the research inside these institutes. Well, these are the research institutes at the state of São Paulo. We have very small ones and very large ones. For example, we have the Butantan Institute. We have the Institute of Research in Nuclear Energy. We have also the Institute of Development of Technology, EPT, and things like that. But we also have very small ones, like let's say SEAD, which is mostly a research on the more research institute that collects and analyzes data about demography in São Paulo. Since 2023, 3 institutes, the Botanical Institute, the Forest Institute, and the Geological Institute, Institute of Geology, came together to become INPA, the Institute of Environmental Research. Well, this is we made this distribution, Professor Simon Schwartzman and me. We made this distribution looking at mostly the content of the internet pages from these institutes. The main idea is how much for them it is important to emphasize the utility of the knowledge they produce, of their outputs, and to what degree they emphasize the idea that they are doing research, basic research, research that forward the fundamental understandings of, well, nature and everything else. As you can see, we have a number of institutes that you could place in the Pasteur's quadrant, which means that they do, let's say, strategic research. They do research on both fundamental understanding, and also very much focus it on the application of this knowledge, which is, let's say, the Instituto Butantan, the IPEN, the Institute, I forgot the name of this institute, but anyway, and the Agronomic Institute of Campinas. They are strong. Which, something that it's quite interesting is that we don't have pure basic research institutes doing really only basic research, which for me it's quite good, because it means that, well, this should be a place for academic research, for research done inside the universities and things like that. We have a number of institutes that are in the Edson quadrant that do really applied research. Well, the FAPESP have done a lot about supporting these institutes. As you can see, the support for these institutes grew a lot, which means that these researchers from these institutes were very successful in applying in many calls and in many applying for the support from FAPESP. FAPESP has had a small program for supporting the development of these institutes, but most of them are grants that these researchers succeed in applying for the major programs opened by the major calls opened by FAPESP. And as you see, it's from 2012 on that really this support really took place and created a kind of momentum for supporting research inside these universities. As you can see, there is a lot of different kinds of support. Most of them is support for research projects. But in 2012 until 2019, we have a large number of scholarships given to these institutes, which means that the human resources that these institutes have for doing research increase it a lot. It creates really a very important push for research inside these institutes. We can also see how they fare in accessing some very special programs that FAPESP has for supporting long-term research. For example, the thematic projects. Some centers, like the Centers for Engineering, Centers for Applied Research, and also the Center for Research and Innovation and Diffusion of Knowledge, which is CEPID, which I think it's one of the most important program, the most powerful program supporting research launching for FAPESP. Most of the research done by these, the research projects presented by these researchers are coming from their initiative. Just a small number of programs answer some calls opened by FAPESP. Most of them come from the initiative from the researcher. Which doesn't mean that this is not, it doesn't have, the research doesn't have a consumer, because of course you can have an application in mind, but at the same time really present a very good research to FAPESP to have access to the funds. The other thing that it's very important is the number of scholarships that researchers from these institutes are able to attract to these institutes, which is quite interesting because, as you see, most of these researchers, most of these scholarships are linked to graduate programs. For example, there is a lot of scholarships for master, for doctoral students, postdocs. Postdocs is quite easy to have, but which means that you can see that the researchers in these institutes also have links with graduate programs that are organized inside the public universities. So there is a quite interesting connection between these institutes and the academic life inside the more research-oriented universities at the state of São Paulo, which is quite interesting because it tells us a story about a really well-connected web of research in São Paulo. You see the number of well, this is the masters, the doctorates, scholarships. and it calls our attention about the performance of Butantan and IPEN, mostly after Butantan got the first CEPID that was given to a research institute. It really creates a kind of attracting pool of researchers, academics, students, and other scholarships for this institute. Well, the main idea is to look at how the postdocs are distributed inside these institutions, among these institutions, and you see that postdocs that were supported by FAPESP, they mostly go to the institutes that are placed in the Pasteur's quadrant, which means it is the institutions that were able to create a kind of, well, let's say, a kind of academic environment inside the institution that are able to to win scholarships for postdocs and also attract these postdocs, which is quite interesting, which means that we have among the research institutes in São Paulo a number of very tough institutions that really are very competitive in terms of offering research, a very good research environment to these young scholars. Well, I would just go very quickly about the support for internationalization. Again, you see that the period between 2012 and 2019 is the golden era for supporting internationalization of these institutes. After the pandemic, they didn't go so well, but yes, it was this period that really these institutes really got support were able to grasp support for internationalization, and mostly mobility. It is less frequently. Well, again, you see that the support for internationalization go to the institutes that are positioned in the, let's say, the Pasteur quadrant, the quadrant that are reserved for research environments that are at the same time were focused in advancing new knowledge and applying this knowledge to useful ends. Well, as a conclusion, I think that we can look at this distribution again to see that without this, it is these institutes that are really well successful in creating a good connection with FAPESP and assuring a very strong support for their research agenda. We have also these other institutes that are not so well succeeded, but they are quite good. They perform quite good. But what happens with these institutes? These institutes are more, let's say, applied research oriented. They didn't even appear in the support from FAPESP. got just one project in the case of the Institute of Health, yeah, Institute of Health, and then the others are never appear. They never even applied to have a support from FAPESP. It's not that they didn't succeed, they never applied for that. So these issues, this reality creates some questions about the science, the research policy in Brazil. I think it's not São Paulo, but it's Brazil. It's the idea that research policy in Brazil is mostly dominated by the academic logic. You know, when you evaluate an application, a researcher, you look at, well, his performance as graduate advisor, his performance, his kind of contract that he holds with the institute, with his employer. So we have a strong academic drift inside the Brazilian research environment. Is it good? Yes, I think that it's good to a certain degree. I think it's good because it creates a pressure for good research, and it creates a quite useful dynamics in which you, at the same time that you do research, you provide environment for training the next generation of researchers, which is my professor, Professor Eunice Duran, used to say, well, this is the stronghold of science in Brazil, is that it's linked to graduate education. But is it enough for you to create a health web of research in a country like Brazil, a country where, you know, there is always this complaint that, yes, we do a very good research, but the problem is that, you know, the industry, the Brazilian industry is not interested in our knowledge. Well, it's quite easy to blame the other, isn't it? And I like this saying coming from a very known singer in Brazil. He said, yes, you know, because Narciss, he's the god of the beauty in the Greek world, in the Greek mythology. He look at something that is not like him, and he say, oh, this is ugly. And I think I am wondering if we don't, this behavior, this idea is not present inside our perspective when we look at, let's say, applied research. Research that it's not done by PhD, that is not linked to graduate education, and it doesn't really is focused in advancing knowledge, but it's just focusing in applying knowledge. Let's say, for example, the Institute of Food, ITAU, he is working with developing new, different ways to packing food, healthy ways to packing food. But this doesn't advance knowledge. It's just applying knowledge that we already have about, you know, the plastic effects and things like that. But we don't support them because, yeah, you know, they do ugly applied research. So, and the main idea is it makes sense to have public funds supporting applied research? I would say that Vannevar Bush would say no. No, this is not a problem for public money, because this is something that should be done by the enterprises. But it's not done. You know, we know that our industry, our enterprises, they don't do that. They don't do that. And there is a lot of international experience that say, well, yes, we have special branches or special institutions that are focused in supporting applied research. For example, the TECHIS in Finland, nowadays it's called Business Finland, the NEDO in Japan, the KIET in Korea, IRAP in Canada. In the case of IRAP, it's a branch of the main research foundation in Canada, but it's a totally different institution. And I think that our research with the public, the research institutes raise this idea. Is it enough to have a research foundation dominated by the academic logic supporting research? I would say yes, it is. It does a lot of things supporting and pushing research at the universities toward the Pasteur quadrant, toward a more support, more interactive environment and things like that. But the other side of the research environment stays out of the reach of these institutions. So, is FAPESP able to perform this role supporting applied research? I think that to a certain degree, yes, but no. Because, you know, we always look at them and say, they don't have a PhD, they don't know really how to do research, they don't publish in science, so they are not so good. No, they are not, they are different, they are different. They are not good, not worse than us, but they are different. And maybe we should start to think about creating different designs of support for research outside the academic realm. Okay, well, this is, thank you.
Well, please, now it's the time for Ana Maria Carneiro from Unicamp. She will talk about job mobility in Brazil's academic market. Is okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So
It's
now
this,
I have it.
tomorrow, in the second part of this event, I will be presenting our studies about the Brazilian scientific diaspora. Today, I will be talking about the job mobility in the Brazil academic market. So it's a study regarding the academic market of Brazil. So it's not international mobility. Most of the studies are related with international mobility. So we tried to use some specific database, Brazilian database, and to do a different study about the mobility in Brazil. Because many studies do not look for the entire academic sector. They tend to look to the public sector, And here we are trying to see the whole academic sector in Brazil. So this is a collaborative effort with Ana Maria Jimenez, that is here, Luisa, that is here also, and she is from IAC, one of the institutes of research that Beth presented. Eduardo Capote, that is a statistician that is not here, and also Luciane Ferreiro, that is a colleague from Unicamp. She's not here, and she is also an author from the other study that Yohanna presented, and I forgot to say. So I present this, and it's important to say that the Brazilian higher education is one of the biggest markets in the world, considering including the number of faculties employed here. So we have two main questions. The first question is, who are the mobile academics? And the second is, what are the effects of mobility in terms of type of institutions? So when they move from institutions, between institutions, what types they are moving, if they are moving from a private institution to a public, and also or from a more research-intensive institution from a more public teaching institution. We are looking into the geographical distance covered during these employment changes, and also what happens with the money, if they increase or decrease their salary. So our main database is the Brazilian Annual Social Information Report, that's called the RAIS in Portuguese, using early records from 2003 to 2021. We focus on 290,000 individuals who had at least one job in 2021 classified as higher education teachers. So we are focused only on faculty members. For each of them, we included all their formal jobs since 2003, as long as the employer was linked to higher education. We also use data from the Ministry of Education and the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics to clean and enrich this database. All the jobs records were organized by individual to build employment histories, identify the mobility events. And this database includes information about demographics, information about the institutions, and about information about the employment, so like hiring and dismissal date, workload, and salary. This is a very rich database that is very unique in Brazil. It's very rare. Our country has a database for formal employment as we have here. So in order to identify the mobilities, we classify them in some types. So each academic is linked to a principal employer, that's called B, identified by their earliest recorded job. If they work at another institution later, we classify the mobility into three types. So the first one is accumulation, when the new job occurs entirely within the employee is still employed at the primary job. This can include short-term or long-term position. The second one is the transition, when the new job starts before the previous one and ends and continues after the first job ends. And the third type is change, when there is a break between leaving one job and start another. This does not include sabbaticals or leave under contract. These mobility dates are also used to calculate the change in variables like salary per hour and also workload per hour. So here is the typology of higher education institutions in Brazil. I will present very briefly because of the time, but this is important to say some things here. This typology was initially developed by Professor Simon Schwartzman with other colleagues and in 2020. And during our research project, it was more developed, and it tried to reflect that the Brazilian higher education system is very extensive and heterogeneous. The typology developed by the project considered the main specificity of the higher education institutions by considering the qualification of the faculties, the working regimes, whether the emphasis is on undergraduate or graduate teaching, and scientific production. The typology considered the different institutional profile and what the HAEs actually do, allowing for a more realistic view of their performance and not only thinking about the legislation and what they should be doing. Here we can see the numbers of maintainers, the units of each according to their National Register of Legal Entity, and also, and most important, the employment ties, the number of employment ties. So here I would like to reinforce 4 types. The type 7, that's the type that has the most number of employment ties. So is the private school or faculties that represent a large group of small private higher education institutions with around 600 students each. Spread out throughout Brazil, their emphasis relies on evening undergraduate teaching, and there is a preponderance of teachers without a doctorate. The number 5, the private university and university center, emphasize undergraduate teaching also. Most of the teaching staff does not have a doctorate and have part-time contract. The other is the number 1, large private institutions. These are private higher education institutions with more than 30,000 students, including for-profit HAEs, some of which are traded on the stock exchange. The majority of students are undergraduate on evening or distance learning courses. Only a third of the teaching staff have a doctorate, and their contracts are part-time. And finally, a group of public institutions, the 6 public teaching institutions, they are public institutions emphasizing undergraduate teaching. Around 6% of the teaching staff have a doctorate, and the majority have full-time contracts. And not just to leave, the types 2 and 3 represent the most research-intensive types of institutions in Brazil, both public. So now, going back to the mobility events, almost half of our sample recorded at least one employment mobility event between 2003 and 2021. This indicates a highly dynamic academic job market in Brazil. As you can see, excluding the people that does not have a mobility event, the second more frequent is a change, a type of event. So who are the academic, the mobile academics? First, in terms of gender, male professor shows a slightly higher mobility rate compared to female professors. In terms of race and color, white academics exhibit greater mobility than non-white academics. In terms of age, there is a progressive decrease in the propensity for job mobility as the age of the entry into the first employment increase. And in terms of academic degree, the level of academic degree at the first employment is also associated with mobility frequency, with doctorates showing great stability compared to master and graduate. This significant difference highlights underlying disparity and trends within the academic job market in Brazil. And now, when they move, where they are going. Here, you can see the mobility events between institutional types, from the first to the second and to the third employment. The baseline includes the single job cases. This analysis excludes the accumulation mobility type of event, considering only transition and changes. So, from the 290,000 academics represented here in the 9 types, we can see that the typology 9 is has very few cases. So everyone has a first job in the database, but only 39% have a second job, and only 14% has a third one. And here, it's a kind of zoom in on the mobility from the first to the second job, according to the typology of Hayes. The mobility between the second and the third jobs is very similar. And here you can see 3 groups in terms of mobility, considering the types of higher education institutions. So first, the greater mobility group involves type 1, that's large, higher private institution, including for-profit, type 5 and type 7, that represent private Hayes that has the majority of employment ties. In this group, there is a general mobility trend to the same type. The second group is the medium mobility that involves type 4 and type 6, that include the public institutions, and the low mobility group includes type 2 and type 3. When there is mobility in this group, it occurs for type 6, that is the public teaching institutions, goes to type 7, that is the faculty, private schools. In summary, most mobility occurs among the most teaching-intensive types, most strongly in types 7, 5, and 1, and least in types 6 and 4. There is less mobility in the more research-intensive public institutions, types 2 and 3. It is interesting to note that mobility between types of institution is similar by gender. Here is the result regarding the geographic distance and also the year of mobility. So the mobility events were concentrated between 2007 and 2014. The reasons may involve the increase in public financing for private higher education institutions through FIES and ProUni, as well as in the public sector through the program to support restructuring and expansion plans of Federal University, REUNI. Mobility is concentrated over short distance, around 63% within the same city or up to 50 kilometers. And now the salary changes. We analyze, this is the second analysis we do. Here we are considering the monthly salary, not the first analysis we did that considered the hour salary. So here we are considering the total salary, regardless the hourly rate, to see the effect of the mobility events. So we are not looking, not so looking to the transition event, but also the effect over time. So the graph on the left, that is not, shows salary in 3 moments. First, at the end of the period at the previous employer. Second, at the start of the next employer. And third, in the most recent year at the new employer. Usually 2021, but it could be earlier. The graph on the top right shows the multiple salaries in each year at the new employer, divided by the entry salary, so the salary in the year 0, which show the average salary growth, already adjusted for inflation. And the graph on the bottom right shows the same data, but takes the final salary of the previous job as the denominator of the multiple to see recovery in the event of the loss. Here we can see that if you move from a private institution to a public institution, considering the types 1, 4, 5, and 7, it leads to a 40% increase in the monthly salary over time. It's not immediately, but after 6 years. That can be explained by longer working hour or a higher salary. So once in the public higher education institution, faculty members' wage remains stagnant for 5 years and only increase after the 6th year compared to their entry salary. And it's not a good decision to go from public to private institutions, but it happens. So it's more rare, but it happens. Here we see the change in monthly salary when moving from public to private institutions. The monthly salary drops by 25% over time. It only recovers the value of the previous salary after the 5th year in the new employer, except for a few outliers with a considerable salary increase that is not shown in these graphs. We need to understand better the motivation for this change because it's not based on salary decision. It could be related to the search for flexible working hours because, as we saw, most of the private institution has part-time or hourly contracts. Maybe family issues or even the precarious condition of some public higher education institutions in the last years. It's important to note that the sample size of cases that move from public to private institution represents only 58% of the sample size of private to public institutions mobility. And to finalize this presentation, so we are still putting the ideas together, but the job mobility analyzed here reflects both precarity, as shown by the accumulation of hourly or part-time contracts, and opportunities to obtain more stable contracts or better pay. As can be seen, there's little transition between structurally different types of higher education institutions, and mobility is generally limited to similar types, especially within the private sector. And the segmentation of higher education institutions reinforce the structural divisions in the academic market for the Brazilian study. Mobility may reflect job stability rather than advancement. And our research agenda on this topic includes the effect of maternity on mobility, because there is a flag for maternity leave on this database. Mobility between regions and different types of contract. And the RISE database structure is promising for future research. Thank you.
Well, we have just finished a most fascinating session, showing once again how evidence helps thinking on politics and policies. I am sure that you, like me, have at least some few questions for each presentation, but unfortunately, I have been informed that time pressure does not allow for exchanges now. But hopefully we can exchange in a near future by other means. So, oh, good, good. I say what I was told. Huh? I am a very obedient person. So now I will, Sergio, allow us for 2 questions. So please, it's okay. Profit from the opportunity.
I try to read my question in English, but if you don't understand, I can speak in Portuguese. First of all, I would like to congratulate everyone on the panel. Really very pleasant. My question is about equity, diversity, and inclusion in Brazil, in Brazilian funding agencies. With the current anti-diversity politics in US, we have been seeing many Brazilian enterprises quietly stepping back from their IDE commitments. Do you believe the same is happening or could happen in the near future with Brazilian research funding agencies?
I think that is for you. Yeah.
Hello. I was worried about that too when I first saw that enterprises were changing the way they terminating their DEI, EDI programs. But what I've been seeing in conferences is that there is a more optimistic approach regarding funding agencies specifically. To continue to, if they are able to debate, if they are still able to talk, if they are not under this specific legislation that is prohibiting to use these words, they understand that it is their crucial role to still do that. So I think that in Brazil, we are still having these committees, we're still having these talks. We have Serra Pilheira that is promoting this in its core. So I think I will join the optimistic view that if they are able, if this is not, if it cannot damage or somehow constrain budget, that is the case of the United States, I think that the people that are engaging with this research consider their role to speak if they are still able to speak, to research if they are still able to research. I think that's it.
Another question?
Yeah, well, very well. Let me ask you about this gray zone. In the morning, Kay was talking about the DARPA model, and James talking about the experimental units. There are a lot of discussion all the world in this report of Manuel Heitor about how to improve the more breakthrough projects in science, etc. So it's a suggestion, really. If you can measure the success, the future success in terms of productivity in science, impact, between projects that have mixed evaluation. Some of the referees really like very well, but don't know everybody likes the project. The idea of to DARPA model is to look with very good attention this kind of project. This is about the bias of scientific reviews, about everybody thinks that the project is so good that is not so good that because people know what they expect to do. So some agencies are trying to look when the evaluation have different point of view. Some of people think the project is really very good, but there are people that don't like it because don't understand the project. So I would like to know if you can, looking for your data, select some projects that have this kind of mixed feeling, and using the data to look at the future of this group of researchers, if they have success in the future. It's like to try to understand if it's possible for us to create some kinds of experimental units, and have some data about this to suggest to create some experimental units.
Okay, thank you, Pacheco, for the question. I think it's possible for FAPESP and us together to do something like that. Actually, in the regular research grant, we have just, for 95% of the proposals, we have just one referee. So that's a problem with this program, particular, because we don't have like any dispute between the reviewers. I don't know if you internally had the scores given by the assessors and so on. So maybe if we have these other kind of data, we could discuss this disparity. But that's why we are trying to look for other programs, because we have data from the young researcher, but we also have a lot of one review per proposal. So maybe the thematic projects or something that we have like a huge number of projects, but we have also a huge number of reviewers, and maybe we can do this kind of experiment. Maybe it's possible. Because maybe in this kind, I don't know, Fernando can complement, maybe we are going to have like this gray zone a little bit different. So maybe they are not so similar in those approved and neglected, and maybe trying to approve some not that well evaluated projects, and of course deny some of the well evaluated, and try to see what's happening in the future. I think it's possible to understand. Maybe trying to see a specific program of FAPESP that is whose purpose is novelty, because maybe in this case we can understand, like, if we are not understanding, and if novelty is really going to happen after that. Maybe the P project, which is new in FAPESP, or something like that. I don't know if Fernando wants to.
No, I totally agree with Adriana. I'll just check out the sample size that we have with this both reviewers and see if it's possible to analyze or make some kind of modeling of that. And we are also analyzing the same way. Here's just regular grants, and we are now analyzing this for the younger investigators. I believe it's just one as well, just one reviewer. But we have the same researchers. Many of the 2,000 of the younger investigator researchers, that it was the first proposal sent to FAPESP. We also have them in the regular grant. So maybe trying to see this would be a good idea as a case of success, maybe, so we can try to do this. We are analyzing this data right now.
Well, now we are closing the session.